I don't think he ever caught it.
I bet not. I bet not. Janet was from a small family, but he was from a very large family. Yeah. Yeah, I'll announce it. They're meeting on Thursday in Greenville at Tribute. And the service at Greenville, it's called Tribute now. I think it used to be Oliver. Yeah, it's right there where the two main funeral homes are in Greenville. I know where that is. Anyway. Well, yeah, it's not hard to find. But anyway, and I'll announce it. I'll put it on my also.
And the address?
Yes, I'll make sure I put the address on that there for you.
Hey.
I see you coordinated your
I
mask.
thought that today. I thought, you can't wear the name blue mask. You gotta wear the purple.
You've got the Mexico State flag up there.
What?
I see you have the New Mexico State flag
Yes,
up
in
there.
honor of Nancy, this will be a New Mexico slide background.
I've got all these things.
You'll have to point out if I made any errors in what I picked. So.
Okay, I've got it listed.
Okay, yeah, to be arranged for a future date.
Do you have my microphone?
Sounds good.
We're not using mics anymore.
Why not?
No. We get too much reverberation, and you're speaking into the camera right here.
Okay.
And as long as you use your educated voice, you won't have any problem being heard in the church.
A couple years ago, he came right back, and we were so blessed to have her. Yes.
So think about what we're doing this coming week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, I will.
Because
I'll check.
I'm working tomorrow, and I'm in the garage. Tuesday, I'm going fishing. 80-some degrees.
Yeah, you best do that.
Where are you going?
I fish Indiana, Ohio. I fish about 8 or 10 different lakes. I'm probably going to go to Prairie Creek, up off of 35. Take 36 to 35, about 1,600 acres of water.
Oh my.
Go to Brookville, that's 5,000 acres. I'm just giving you
Brookville Lake, yeah.
Dang. Good morning. Welcome to First Universalist Church in New Madison on this slightly foggy spring day. We've suffered a loss. One of our members, Janet, has passed away this week. We'll have more announcements about that during the Joys and Concerns about the viewing and the service and that type of stuff, and stuff that you can do to help out the family. So, it's not going to be a joyous service today, but we want to rejoice in Janet's membership in the church, the support that her family has received from the church, and that hopefully she is in a better place. Our welcome this morning is from Erica Hewitt, one of my favorite authors, UU authors. I've used her many times. Good morning. Welcome to our Unitarian Universalist congregation in this growing, journeying community. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home, and this is to those here and out there. Most of us, many of us were once too seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that well here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. Whether it's your first time in worship or your 100th time, we hope that you will find questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in living boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. Do we have any announcements? We're still in progress with our planters for families that will be discussed as we come along this month, and then we'll let you know what the results are there. We will have like a community day, probably Saturday morning, whatever time is convenient for everybody. get together, put all the planting soil in the pots, put the plants in, and then go out and deliver them. So we're still in the process of doing that. Any other announcements? Okay, the prelude. If I Love You, Richard Rogers. Thank you, Lloyd. And probably by coincidence, but surely a befitting piece, a little tinge of melancholy in If I Love You. I should have said during the announcements, Nancy Bowen is with us today, Dr. Nancy, and we'd love to have her here. And she'll be here a couple more times before she returns to her home in
New Mexico.
Yeah, that you're cheating because you already know that. This
Not
is
Mexico. It's the big space between Arizona and Texas.
this is the New Mexico flag, in case people didn't know. So our slides today will all be from New Mexico. And Nancy will correct me because I'm not an expert in New Mexico. I have visited Roswell, not for the aliens, just because I had a friend that lived there. And it is a fun state. There's an amazing amount of things going on there. So, okay, let's get on to. Anybody know where this is besides Nancy? Santa Fe. They've got some really beautiful towns, and you can see the Latin American Mexican influence from the Pueblo style. That's kind of a highlight of New Mexico, and something you'll see a lot there. Okay, our chalice lighting is a child's chalice lighting, Gratitude for the Earth by Karen G. Johnson. What if, when I light the chalice, you hear an invitation to welcome gratitude for the earth? This week, as I light the chalice, we can think about and talk about blessings from this planet. I went ahead and thought about a few. Spring rain. I know some people don't like it, but it just feels so kind of awakening the earth as it comes down and it's warm. And of course, what happens when you have the warmth and spring rain? Morels. And I've already found 2 this year. Usually I find more than that, but I've already had 2 and scarfed them up right away. Luckily, my wife doesn't really care for them, so I get to eat them all. And the other pussy willows. I just found a bush on sale somewhere for like $10 at Myers or Menards or someplace, and I don't know exactly when the pussy part of it comes out, the little fuzzy things, because now it's all fully leafed out. So.
February.
In February?
Into late February.
Okay, so I'll be looking forward to that. We're going to plant that in the front yard, and hopefully that will take. Does anybody else have anything they want to voice as an idea for gratitude for spring? Okay. And now with this flame of hope shedding light in your heart, what is your list? Our opening hymn is 20. Be thou my vision, my treasure thou art. Does everybody know what that is? The state bird, which is?
Roadrunner.
The roadrunner. The devoted enemy of coyotes?
There are coyotes, but there are more roadrunners.
Yes. And the state bird. So, let's see. Affirmation is 459 in your hymnal. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. By William F. Schultz. Does anybody know what this is? I'd be a surprise if anybody knows. Nancy, do you know? The state insect of New Mexico? No. This is the tarantula wasp. The tarantula wasp. So can you guess how it got its name? This is one of those wasps that when it finds a tarantula, it lays its egg, just one egg, in the tarantula while the tarantula is still alive. And then when the egg hatches, the little larva eats the tarantula from the inside out while it's still living. So,
The wonders of nature.
the wonders of nature. And you didn't think New Mexico was gruesome. Yes?
I wonder how big that insect is.
You can see from the flower. You can't see very well, but it's sitting on a flower blossom. So I would say probably an inch or two. It's not. That's not a giant flower blossom. It's it looks like a cherry blossom on the tree. I don't think they are cherry blossoms because the leaves are even smaller, but that's what it looks like.
It's more like a fennel blossom.
Yeah, a little tiny thing. So, and a tarantula is only about the size of your hand, so to make a decent meal, the larva couldn't be too big. So, just another fun fact for a Sunday morning.
That's not the children's story, is it?
No.
But don't be surprised if that would show up as a type of children's story. Because we all know the Brothers Grimm were aptly named, and those were considered children's stories in those days. I think when they figured they scared the pants off kids, they behaved better. Okay, the children's story is The Kindness of Squirrels. And there's squirrels everywhere. From the day they were born, Harley and Indiana were loyal friends. The two squirrels played from sunup to sunset. They chased each other around the playgrounds, up and down the trees, across the roofs of the houses. They sat side by side and talked about nothing in particular. They just loved each other's company. Here's what I think Harley said one day to his companion as he gave her a kernel of popcorn. "And what's that?" Indiana asked. "When we grow up," Harley said, "I think we should build our homes near one another so we can remain friends forever." Indiana twitched her nose in approval. "Yes, indeed," she said. Not long after, the day came for the two squirrels to leave their parents' nests. Harley gathered twigs and leaves and with Indiana's help built his new home in the woods, and Indiana then built her house nearby. Then one day Harley told Indiana that he had fallen in love with Myrtle and was going to marry her. "I'm so happy for you," Indiana said. And when Harley's wife had a litter of baby squirrels, Indiana became their godmother. On Tuesdays she went to their house, and on Saturdays they went to hers. Every Sunday they all went to the cafeteria where the children had pizzas and the adults drank strong coffee from small cups. Sounds just like people, don't they? Indiana didn't want to marry. She lived happily in her house by herself, content to feed her fish, fix lawnmowers, and take brisk walks early in the morning. True to their promise, Harley and Indiana remained fast friends. And here's Harley's family with the little squirrels. If you want a closer look, you can come up afterwards and see the pictures. These are pretty nice pictures. One night as Indiana lay curled in her bed of leaves, she thought about her old friend and said, "Harley has such a big family to care for, while I only have myself to feed. So I'll take him some of what I save for myself and give it to him." That night, all was dark when Indiana secretly, quietly carried the food from her barn to Harley's. She opened the door and without a squeak, left her gift on the floor. At that moment, Harley woke with a start. He turned to Myrtle and said, "Indiana has no one to help her with her work, while we have our children to help us. We have more food than we need. I'm going to give her some." "That's a good idea, dear," his wife said as she dreamily rubbed her eyes. Harley jumped out of bed and went to his barn. Filling his cheeks with seeds and nuts, he silently scampered through the lanes and secretly left his stash in Indiana's barn. This scurrying in the dark continued night after night, Indiana going to Harley's and Harley going to Indiana's. And neither one of them seemed to notice the pile of nuts that they didn't put there, but that would ruin the story. Only after the squirrels grew old and died did others discover the secret that Indiana and Harley had kept for one another. The town squirrels were so moved by Harley's and Indiana's gift-giving that they built a monument to honor them. Today, halfway between their houses stands a statue of the two small animals. An inscription on the statue reads, "For the kindest and most generous squirrels, the two friends, Harley and Indiana." Harley and Indiana helped each other without telling each other. Why do you think they decided to keep this a secret? And that answer is open for any suggestions that you have or you want to think of. Okay. Joys and concerns.
I'd like to light a candle in remembrance of Janet Baker,
Yes.
a loyal and longtime member of this church, and also in remembrance and outreach, of course, and our thoughts and our prayers to Janet Baker and the entire family. I did learn of the funeral arrangements, celebration of life, and that will be at the Tribute Funeral Home in Greenville, and it will be a viewing on Thursday evening from 5 until 7, and the service, Celebration of Life, will be on Friday at 11 a.m.
Friday at 11 a.m. at Tribute. And don't get confused, practically every funeral home now is a Tribute funeral home, strangely. So we'll put on Facebook and YouTube, we'll put the address and the times of the service if you want to check. You're always free to call somebody in the church or call the church or message us or call me on the phone. If you need information, we'll be happy to pass that along. For Kenny's benefit, as is traditional, we'll be preparing some casserole dishes or some finger food that if he has people come visit him for condolences, he will have something there to serve that will be ready to go. Roberta was nice enough. She got fresh donuts from the Amish lady, so nothing day old today. So in honor of that, I plugged in the coffee pot back there, so you can actually have, there's instant coffee, little individual sticks. You can have that, and actually we have some juice drinks in the basement. If somebody doesn't want coffee and wants a juice drink, I'd be happy that I don't get that for them. And if you want to stick around afterwards, for those of you who are here, we'll kind of discuss the arrangements and write down things. And we'll fill out a card for Kenny, as we do on every occasion. Any other joys and concerns? Yes, Jeff.
To me, it's a concern. Jeff, my son Jeff, was called back into the Foreign Service.
Ooh.
He will be a special envoy to the Horn of Africa.
Ooh.
And you may see the announcement in the paper. I do not know. I'm not putting the announcement in the paper. But the government. So he's back with the State Department.
We honor Jeff and his service to the country, which some people don't seem to think much of, but those of us who know what it's like know what an honor it is. And our thoughts and prayers truly go with him to the Horn of Africa, which is not the safest place in the world. But the State Department does a pretty good job of taking care of their people, so we don't have any real worries. But
he went through those many years, and I was so relieved when he retired and then called him back.
Yep.
In Libya.
And
Lebanon.
Lebanon, yeah.
Lebanon. He was the ambassador to Lebanon.
And that's never been a really common place either, so basically all of Africa from top to bottom. But in the way the world is now, no place is really safe. We've done this before. I guess we could put this in as a concern. Part of the reason that we're having such an influx of refugees, not just this year, but the last 20 years, is Latin America and South America are just beset by problems. Corruption, natural disasters. There's a drought going on in Guatemala and Honduras now that's driving farmers off the land. The government there is no help to them. It would seem to me an obvious solution is for us to send aid to Guatemala and Honduras so those people could stay there rather than trekking 1,000 or 2,000 miles on foot to come and get a job here. Wouldn't it be cheaper and make more sense for us just to spend the money and help them stay there and help their countries? But obviously there's complications with politics that I am not aware of. So that's a concern that we have that we need to consider for the future. A joy that I have is the spring rains make the grass grow, and we have Lloyd and Chaz, and the grass has been mown and the yard looks nice, the church looks nice. It could look nicer, and we're still working on that, but it's a pleasure to be a member of a church that fits in this town so well. Okay. Yes.
Joy and concern. I have a joy and concern.
Joyce, yes, I'm sorry.
So, this isn't news, but I am officially retiring from ESR this year. So this next week is the last week of classes. So, and then I'm like buried in paperwork with papers to grade and stuff. So I figure I've filled up the month of May. So the reason Tim has been showing New Mexico things is because I am moving back to New Mexico, which is where I grew up. And my mom is there, and I'm going to be moving in with my mother. And my sister and brother-in-law are there, and their 2 kids are there. And I have other friends. I've kept my United Methodist connections back there, so I'll be heading back to the Southwest. When that happens is a giant question mark. So the joy is, thank goodness I'm retiring. It's like not a moment too soon. The concern is there's just so much stuff that has to happen for between now and whenever. So, and I can tell I'm tired. So, anyway, just so you know, you can't get rid of me that easily. I still plan on coming here several more times before then. And I just, I'll probably say this more than once, but I have so enjoyed being a part of your community.
We've so much
I
enjoyed
feel
that.
like it's my community too.
Yes, exactly.
Nancy, I have a question. Once you move out there, are you going to get completely out of being a minister? Or you're not going to get...
My first goal in retirement is to see how long it takes me to get bored. And, I think like I still might have some writing projects to do, and what I do beyond that is also like a giant question mark. So,
Thank you.
Nancy,
yeah.
how did you happen to choose Earlham?
Pardon?
How did you happen to choose Earlham?
So I was doing my doctoral work, and so this is how I remember this story. A student in like the intro to Old Testament class was cataloging journals in the library and flipping through them. And apparently one of them was one of the Quaker journals. And it had an ad that they were looking for an Old Testament professor, and they wanted somebody who could like do both church and academy. They wanted somebody who could do like feminist biblical interpretation, which was a new thing 30 years ago. And somebody who believed in like holistic education. So it's sort of like, oh, it sounds like a dream job to me. And this student went and got another of the grad students who said, you have to get Nancy to show her this ad. And so I applied, and here I am.
And we've all been blessed, and the students of Earlham, and my wife actually went to Earlham. That's where she graduated.
And Bethany students as well. Yeah.
Yes, and Bethany students as well.
And when my husband David was working for American Aggregates, they sent him to Earlham for some further education.
And Nancy will be with us at least once a month, she's promised, for as long as she's here. And then hopefully we can talk her into doing a YouTube type thing or recording something, and we can actually bring a recorded service. We won't be able to interact and chat with her, although if Emerson can help us and we can work out a Zoom thing, we can probably do a Zoom, an actual live interaction from here. That's beyond my capability, but I mean, it is a possibility. But we would still love to have you just on YouTube. We've done that
Just
before.
keep in mind the time zone difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you'd have to
2
get up.
hours. Yeah.
You'd have to get up early, but you could do that.
Yes.
Because we're not changing the time of service. All right. Joys and concerns for those that are not mentioned. We definitely want to keep Kenny in our prayers. We want to keep Janet in our prayers. Janet was such a happy, loving, contributing, generous person that she will be missed not only by Kenny and their family, but by all of us. If you have any unspoken joys, concerns that you would like to share with us, feel free to send us a message. Otherwise, we will hold all of you in our thoughts and prayers. Okay. Skip one. Message. And that is Nancy. And does anybody know what this is? But you should, because they grow around here.
Yucca.
A yucca plant. That's the state plant of New Mexico, and it's obviously spread far and wide. Beautiful when those flowers come out, and then the stems are ugly. You have to get rid of them, but the plant looks nice all year long. Okay.
Morning, everyone. It's great to see you. Been too long. So, as I was thinking about what message to bring today, when I woke up to 3 inches of snow on Earth Day, I was thinking, well, maybe climate change would be a topic. It's like, well, surprise! And I see that that's the theme in the bulletin today, so I'm grateful for that, because that's not what I'm going to talk about. mostly been on my heart is the other main event that happened this week, which was the conviction of the police officer Derek Chauvin in the killing of George Floyd. Now, I don't know about you, but it felt like there was this giant exhale across the country from everyone holding their breath over what the verdict would be. Now, the consensus among my African-American friends on social media is that while this was an important step, it's also just a small step. This does not change, the verdict does not fundamentally change how police officers interact with people of color. And even during the trial, police have killed several other people of color in ways that has left Black people to doubt that police really do believe that Black lives matter. I didn't watch the trial in its entirety. I'm not retired yet. I picked up bits and pieces in news shows later in the evening and in the newspaper. And what I've been pondering on has been the role of bystanders. Who is a bystander? Situations of violence we usually define in terms of the victim and the perpetrator. But there are also those who see it happening, who hear reports of it firsthand, and whose help might be sought by the victims. Those people are the bystanders. Now, there are two groups of bystanders in the George Floyd situation. One group are the other police officers with Derek Chauvin, who failed to intervene in what he was doing. The other group of bystanders are those who witnessed what was happening, especially Darnella Frazier, who at the time was 17 years old and is the one who recorded the incident on her phone. Now, I don't know if you heard or read about what the original press release was from the police about this incident. Its title was, quote, "Man dies after medical incident during police interaction," end quote. It was a short paragraph, and all it said was that Floyd had resisted arrest and then, quote, "suffered medical distress after being cuffed." If not for Darnella Frazier's video, that might have been all we knew about what had happened. But we know from her video that what actually happened was much different, and that according to the jury, medical distress was really murder. I'm haunted by her testimony that she lies awake at night, crying and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more to help him. We also heard in testimony from an off-duty firefighter who attempted to render aid but was rebuffed by the police officers. Another witness, who is a mixed martial arts fighter, recognized what was happening and also urged Chauvin to get off George Floyd's neck. These are bystanders who witnessed what was happening but were unable to help. When I was working on so I'm going to do this really shift now. So you all know I wrote a commentary on Ezekiel, right? Well, in that commentary, there are 7 chapters that are words of judgment against foreign nations: Ammon, Moab, Edom, the Philistines, Tyre, Sidon, and Egypt. Now, what I argue for is that we should view these nations as bystanders who saw Judah's distress inflicted by the Babylonians, but who failed to respond. And what I learned is that what we know from trauma studies is that for trauma survivors, often, I mean not always, but often, their greatest anger may not be at the perpetrator, but at the bystanders who might have been able to help or to prevent the trauma, but failed to do so. Now, there are many levels at which one can be a bystander. There is the mother who fails to intervene when her husband sexually molests their daughter. I'm particularly taken with Amira Haz, who's an Israeli reporter who works in the Palestinian territories. And Amira tells of her mother's distress at seeing German women, quote, looking from the side, end quote, at sick and dying Jewish women marched from a train to Bergen-Belsen. Haz says her work is motivated by that dread of being a bystander. Americans who fail to hold companies accountable for their treatment of workers or buy the products made in sweatshops are also bystanders. Now, just as the act of being a bystander can take many forms, the reasons for being a bystander are legion. It could be fear for one's life or the lives of family members. It could be guilt. You don't do anything because you didn't do something sooner, so you feel like it's too late. Ignorance. You're unaware of what is happening. Hatred. You might actually want that person to suffer. Disinterest. You're not directly affected by it. And greed. You actually profit from the violence. Are just a few of the dozens of possibilities. Now, the other three police officers are going to have to explain at their trials their motivations for failing to help George Floyd. So, when we think about a situation of violence between a perpetrator and a victim, we often think about justice for the perpetrator. Or several folks I've heard about, it's like there's nothing in this trial that can actually bring justice, but there can be accountability. But what would justice or accountability look like for bystanders? So that's sort of an open question that I always have rattling around in my brain. Now, the classic story of this issue is in the New Testament, in the parable of the Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. A lawyer asked Jesus what he must do to inherit eternal life. Jesus' reply is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. The lawyer then asks, who is my neighbor? Jesus tells a parable, a story. A man was journeying from Jerusalem to Jericho, a perilous journey for a number of reasons, where some robbers attacked him, beat him, stole all his stuff, and left him on the road half dead. By chance, a priest was traveling on the same road, saw the beaten man, and just kept on walking. A Levite was also traveling the road, saw the beaten man, and he too kept on walking. The priest and the Levite are bystanders. They saw what had happened, but did nothing to help the beaten man. Nor does the text tell us why they kept on walking. That's a gap, and as I said, there are myriad reasons for being a bystander. One way to fill that gap is to say that, well, maybe they feared that the robbers who had attacked the man were still in the area, and if they stopped to help, they themselves may be attacked. So that sense of fear for one's own safety. Then a Samaritan comes along. Now, there was animosity between Jews and Samaritans, and that's part of the point of the story. We're not told the ethnicity of the man who was beaten, but the way Jesus tells the story, it suggests he was a Jew, and that the priest and the Levite should have helped. But the Samaritan, in the NRSV, the language is, he is moved with pity. He stopped, bandaged the man's wounds, put him on his own animal, and gets him safely to Jericho. He then takes him to an inn where he continues to care for him. And the Samaritan has to continue his journey, so he pays the innkeeper some money to for the beaten man's care with the promise that when he returns, he will pay the innkeeper whatever further expenses might be incurred while he's away. Jesus then asked the lawyer, which of these three was the neighbor to the beaten man? The lawyer answered, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. I think one of the things that black people are asking of us as white people is for us to stop being bystanders. If we see black people being mistreated by white people, we should do something about it instead of finding reasons for why we shouldn't get involved. Now, I am in awe of Darnella Frazier and the other witnesses to George Floyd murder, that they had the courage to stay and try to intervene on his behalf. And mostly because I'm not sure I would have done so. Now, there are all kinds of psychological studies that have considered the issue of overcoming what they call the bystander effect, which is that the bystander effect is basically you don't do anything. In the face of danger, our basic instinct is to freeze or flee. But there are actually things we can do to fight that instinct. Fear is a powerful hindrance, that fear for one's own safety, the safety of others. But sometimes overcoming that fear can be as simple as someone else speaking up when they see something troubling. If just one person does something, that increases the odds that other people will also come to help. Those who are drawn to helping professions such as doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, they already seem to have something within their character that leads them to head toward danger rather than away from it. And I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about 17-year-olds or 57-year-olds who might be able to take some action. In the parable, what motivates the Samaritan is that he had pity on the beaten man. Maybe some people remain bystanders because they don't feel pity for the person in distress. Maybe they feel they deserve it. Perhaps one thing we can work on is increasing our empathy towards others. Or perhaps we keep on walking because that person is a stranger. We are more likely to help or intervene when the person distresses someone we know. But just because the beaten man was a stranger to the Samaritan, it was his pity for the stranger that moved him to act. So in the article I was reading about overcoming the bystander effect, one psychologist noted, quote, "Nobody is born with courage. It is literally something you have to learn. If you practice courageous habits once, they can be replicated again," end quote. Earlier this year, I was reading an article in Discover magazine that was basically saying the same thing. They did brain scans on first responders and found that there were actually differences in the brain from non-first responders. In a sense, they had trained their brains and had practiced courageous habits enough that their brain was now wired to respond instead of to freeze. We have to train our brains. I said it's something we have to learn. Now, I am not advocating that we all rush out and look for situations of danger where we can rush in to intervene. Not the point. All I'm advocating is that we become more aware of the bystander effect. That perhaps we start practicing some courageous habits. Start slow. Start small. You don't have to do it all at once. And perhaps when a situation arises, then we can be ones to have pity and show mercy. So I can, maybe I'll send Tim the link to the article I was reading that you can send around or post on Facebook.
Post on Facebook, yeah.
I'll post it on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
I've thought, a lot about, because I did this with Ezekiel, I thought a lot about bystander issues. And again, I'm the first to say I don't know how I'd respond. So I bring it to you for also something for you to ponder on. I was also thinking that if we want to link it back to Earth Day and issues of climate change, we can also be bystanders when it comes to climate change. We can decide not to take any action that would reduce our carbon footprint. It's easy to do. And so maybe even just taking, maybe some of our courageous steps can be what steps can we take to help to address the issues of climate change? Are there issues in our own community that we can have the courage to go to the city council, write a letter to the editor? Like I said, I'm not advocating that we all rush off into nature, or that we all become a lobbyist or anything like that. But just to start thinking about it in situations where we can actually take action to help.
I would like to direct a little praise to the innkeeper. That's one I hadn't heard before. Mm-hmm. That little bit of information. Mm-hmm. And connect that with cynicism, which is one of the reasons I think people become bystanders. Mm-hmm.
Because you think it's not going to make any difference anyway, so...
Well, as a small-scale innkeeper myself, and as a paramedic and an ED nurse, my cynicism has been boosted like multiple times. And this is what I think the police were facing. But let me go back to the innkeeper first. The innkeeper said, or the Good Samaritan said, when he traveled back the next way, he would pay the innkeeper for any money that he incurred beyond what he'd given him. How many of us will take that at face value? Mm-hmm. How many times have people promised, I'll pay you back for your hamburger today, I'll pay you back Tuesday, and you never see that again? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what my experience has burned into me. The number of people who come to the emergency room or call emergency services and will tell you stories of mistreatment and deprivation, and you can do this in your own experience as you drive down off the exit or the entrance to the interstate, and there's a guy there standing, or a woman with kids, saying, we'll work for food. And I'm sure there's a certain percentage of those that are true, but I've actually stopped and asked them to work. I've had work to do, and they didn't really want to work, they just wanted money. And we've all seen the exposés on USA Today or wherever, where they go back and get into their Mercedes convertible and drive off. So cynicism is not something we're born with, it's something we're taught. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to be discriminating, to know when someone says, I'm hurting, I need help, do they really need it? And then the decision is, does it really hurt you even to help someone who's a scammer? I mean, I've loaned money to people who I knew they were not going to pay me back, but it's something that I felt I had to do at the time.
Well, there's a lot of, I have these conversations with my mother all the time too. The deserving poor.
Yes.
Those who deserve our help versus those who, for some reason, don't deserve our help. And, I mean, this is where, the love your neighbor as yourself gets really tricky. Because, I mean, Jesus said, well, who is the neighbor? The one who showed mercy. It didn't say, well, because the man beaten, didn't say, well, he deserves it more than other people. I mean, so there's not a lot of loopholes when it comes to the New Testament version of things. But I take your point. It is a challenge in that wrestling. I mean, every time any church starts up a food pantry or a meal program, they're like, oh, well, there's just going to be people who come in who don't really need it, or who are going to game the system, or when, so which becomes the reason for why we shouldn't do it at all. And like I said, there could be good and valid reasons for taking those issues into account. And I think all I'm suggesting is that maybe we should even try and push through some of those reasons.
I think those reasons need to be discussed, and we need,
They do need to be
that's the hard
discussed,
thing,
right.
is understanding and
Well,
discriminating.
and I think some of that, so again, I think this is where, again, thinking about my own inner racist person, maybe the reason some people, when conversations like that come up, it's like, well, because what we're not really saying is, well, because those are black people, or, they might be homeless people. That sort of our own inner prejudices start to come out in those conversations that we're not actually acknowledging.
I think if you look at it in a contemporary sense, back to the innocent bystander to the passive versus the courageous bystander, I think in today's standards, at least if you're watching the media, it's technologically enhanced courageousness. Because it's those that fear the police coming back at them in a policing situation, but they're using their cell phones and they're capturing video. And maybe that's the new way of courageousness, because that's often used for intervening and for justice-related efforts.
Yeah, I have the same mental conversations in my head of thinking I need to go to a grocery store and buy a bunch of $25 gift cards so that when I see somebody standing out, I can just give them a $25 gift card, which again is the minimal, instead of just driving by, which is what I normally do. So it's a complicated issue.
I think we see a lot more, at least we hear a lot more, perhaps we've done ourselves, that paying forward, whether it's in McDonald's or at the grocery, supermarket.
Yeah.
I think that gives us some hope or optimism, although obviously we need to ramp it up a bit, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. We'll look forward to next month.
I'll try to do a cheerier topic, perhaps.
Well, we're here to grow religiously and spiritually and emotionally, so it doesn't have to be cheerful.
And pray back.
Okay, our offering is also in the hymnal. It's 479. An awe so quiet, I don't know when it began. A gratitude has begun to sing in me. Was there some moment dividing song from no song? When does dewfall begin? When does night fold its arms over our hearts to cherish them? When is daybreak? Denise Leverton. That's truly a spiritual meditation. You're invited to bring whatever you would like. If you need something, take it out. Feel no obligation to do that. And if you're watching on screen, you can send donations through the website. The website is listed on the Facebook page. Or you can slip an envelope under the door. Or you can take it to the food pantry, Fish, in Greenville. Or you can pass out a $25 gift certificate to someone you see on the street. I want to encourage you not to become totally cynical, because there's only a percentage of those people who are crooks and robbers who are trying to get your money. But I want to encourage you to pay attention to who they are and what's going on, because there's a lot of older people who are losing thousands and thousands of dollars to people who are giving them substantially believable stories that are not true. So. enjoyed. And if you didn't know, Time After Time was the offering song. Two of the most famous things, there's many famous things, but two of the most are Carlsbad Caverns. If you've ever seen that, it is unbelievably magnificent. And of course, Roswell, which has fully embraced the spurious or perhaps true crash of a flying saucer back in the 50s and made an entire industry out of it. I love their street lamp. So, our closing hymn is 29, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. Very nice. Joyful music lifts us sunward in the triumph song of life. Everybody also knows what New Mexico is famous for and is the only state in the nation that has four corners. Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. You can actually lie in the little memorial they have there and have a hand or a foot or two hands and 2 feet in each one of the four states. It's not a very spectacular place. It's kind of a flat desert-like thing with a few buttes and mountains in the distance. But the idea, I think, is what's important for people. And our closing words are 512 in your hymnal. This is kind of a long one, but I think it has some definite meaning. We give thanks for this day, for the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. We give thanks for this day. For this fragile planet, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. We give thanks this day. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. We give thanks this day. For our human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separations, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. We give thanks this day. for high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. We give thanks this day. For all those who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. We give thanks for this day. For human liberty and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. We give thanks this day. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Eugene Pickett. Very appropriate words for today. Cynicism is out there, don't give in to it. Postlude. Isn't it romantic? Richard Rogers. Oh, where do we be without Mr. Rogers? We have a message on Facebook from AJ for the condolences for the Baker family. I want to thank AJ for that. We appreciate any condolences that people want to send along. And we will post the information for the services, as I said, once we get it figured out. We'll post it on Facebook and YouTube. Our last slides. Gila Cliff Dwellings. These are pretty famous cliff dwellers from ancient times, the Anastasi, related to the Anastasi. They're pretty impressive too. You can't see them very well from there, but if you want to look them up online, it's a lot of fun. And as one little thing as we end, I want to play you the cowboy song of New Mexico.
Street.
state cowboy song of New Mexico. If you could listen, if you could hear well enough, all kinds of references to New Mexico. Pinyon pine, adobe, leaning on the adobe wall, the jackrabbit. The thing is just full of things that are specific or almost specific to New Mexico. All right. That concludes our service. New Madison, sorry to have to announce the loss of Janet. And actually, we kind of figured that on our flowers. I put some new tulips in today from the garden, but I left the 2 sagging tulips from last week for Janet and Kenny. Their heads bowed.